I want to talk a little bit this morning about Dr. Martin Luther King's theology. It's partially because February is Black History Month, but also because his theology, though very different from our own, opens a pathway for embracing a romantic religion. One of the things we often forget about Dr. King is that he was an academic theologian. His father, Martin Luther King Sr., wanted his son to join him as co-pastor at his thriving congregation. But MLK Jr. was so excited about the ideas that he found in graduate school. His father worried that more academic work would draw him far away from his Black Baptist roots. Eventually, he accepted his son's academic passions and helped pay for MLK Jr.'s doctorate at Boston University. At Boston University, he explored a huge variety of different ideas, and he eventually settled into a viewpoint called personalism. Personalism places personality at the center of everything, both the personality of God and the personality of people. Just like it sounds, personality refers to that thinking, feeling, acting, and relating piece of who we are. According to personalism, that's really what matters in the world. You might contrast that with materialism. Materialism says that the universe is made up of matter and energy. We humans, too, are nothing more than a complicated combination of matter and energy. Personalism takes the opposite view. According to personalism, the universe is only meaningful when there's a person there to experience it. Martin Luther King Jr. thought that God had to have a personality in order to be considered good, to make good moral decisions and good actions and be in loving relationship. Personality is an important way of seeing God if we're going to have a meaningful relationship, according to King. Only personalities can care about each other, right? Only personalities can know and love each other. King believed that for us to know and love God and to be known and be loved, then God must be thinking and feeling and decision-making. And I know this conscious thinking, feeling, decision-making God is something that doesn't sit well with a lot of Unitarian Universalists. But it's helpful to understand where King is coming from. And his personal God opens some possibilities for our own relationship with the sacred. Now, after last week's sermon, a few people asked me how I experience our prayer or what I think about it. Well, my prayer is honestly pretty rare and random these days. For a long while, though, I had a very active prayer life. If you were here last week, you heard me describe the extemporaneous prayer of my United Methodist friend. It's basically a free-flowing conversation with God. Part of that was because I was spending a little more time with progressive Christians. But my theology wasn't any different from today. I never thought that God was a dude in the clouds sitting around in a robe on his throne. I certainly didn't think that God had conversations or even that God thought or made decisions or acted on behalf of my individual concerns. My conversational prayer was based more on my understanding of myself than my understanding of God. Regardless of what I know or don't know about God, I know that I am a human being. I know that I have a limited capacity to think and to communicate. And as a human, I have a tremendous bias toward relating to other people. all of us overlay human characteristics onto other beings. This is a really crass comparison, but with pets, we interpret their gestures and their actions through the lens of what a human might be communicating with those gestures. In an effort to connect with the sacred, I talked to God in a language that makes sense to me. If there is a God, I have no assumption that God speaks English or that God is particularly concerned with my prayers, but I pray in a way that makes sense to me. This Sunday, I invite you not to pray in this particular way, but to create a religious life starting with who you are as a living, breathing, intelligent, emotionally complex animal. Cultivate a religious life of a person with a body, not just a mind. Cultivate a faith that you can feel, not just think about. For our reading today, I shared with you 3 poems from the tradition of Islamic mysticism. Romantic language and theology isn't exclusive to Islam, but those poets have a particularly beautiful way of expressing this ecstatic rapture with the divine. And the best known of those poets is Rumi. We actually often sing the hymn, "Come, come, whoever you are." I know you're familiar with it. It's based on a Rumi poem. Rumi is considered one of the greatest poets known to history. He was born in 1207 in Afghanistan and lived most of his life in Turkey. His writing and his faith were inspired by a relationship with his teacher named Shams. And a famous story tells about how they first met. It's a beautiful story, and it's also a little bit of a parable. The story says that Rumi was reading in a public square, studying and writing in his journal. Shams suddenly appeared among the crowd. He grabbed Rumi's diary and his books and threw them into a nearby fountain. Rumi was shocked and furious that his books had been ruined. And we come by books easily today. It's difficult to imagine what handwritten books in the 13th century must have meant to a scholar and a poet. A book must have been a rare, complex weaving together of truth. To give up these books would have been a huge sacrifice. So after throwing his books into the fountain, Shams then retrieved these same books and demonstrated a small miracle, showing Rumi that they were still perfectly dry. Then he gave Rumi the choice between scholarship through text or living sacred experience. Rumi chose the latter. Rumi chose to know and love Allah through his own experience, not through the study of the ideas of others. This story recounts the beginning of a relationship between Rumi and Shams. And though Shams was in Rumi's life for only a short while, their intense bond inspired some of the most beloved writing in the world. Some say Rumi would not have gifted the world with such a literary treasure without Shams. Now, Jalaluddin Rumi, writing in the 13th century in Turkey, might seem a world away. But 600 years later, one of our American Unitarian predecessors shared a very, very similar realization. Ralph Waldo Emerson also recognized the importance of experiencing the sacred firsthand, not reading someone else's ancient account. In the opening paragraph of Emerson's most famous piece of writing, the essay Nature, Emerson wrote, Our age is retrospective. It builds the sepulchres of the fathers. It writes biographies, histories, and criticisms. The foregoing generations beheld God and nature face to face, we through their eyes. Why should not we also enjoy an original relation to the universe? Why should we not have a poetry and philosophy of insight, and not a tradition and a religion by revelation to us from history and their stories? Why should we grope among the dry bones of the past? The sun shines today also. There are new lands, new men, new thoughts. Let us demand our own works and laws and worship. Emerson and his transcendentalist friends brought to Unitarianism an understanding that faith is something to be experienced and lived firsthand. It's to be felt as much as thought. Every once in a while in our Unitarian Universalist congregations, people are willing to tell stories of when they felt the sacred. For some, it happens in moments of human connection. For some people, that personal connection with the sacred happens in prayer or meditation. For lots of people, the pathway is music. Not music theory, mind you, not looking at a piece of sheet music written down, but hearing music or performing it, experiencing the beauty with the body as a way of experiencing the sacred. For me, that experience of feeling the sacred happens most often and easily in nature. It's difficult to describe, but in those moments, I feel connected with nature. I feel a sense of life. I feel that my body is a reflection of the life around me. The persistent, uprising, simultaneously fragile and fierce nature. I don't just look and think, oh, how nice that is. I sit and feel how nice this is, this home, this source of my own life, this cycle to which I will return, and that I have always been a part of. And I know that it's good, not because I read it somewhere, but I know it's good because I feel at home. Valentine's Day is coming up in a few days. It brings with it a strange caricature of romance. And it's easy to brush off that saccharine description of love. But real romance is incredibly powerful stuff. Romance is rich with a wide range of emotions and types of attraction. There's some friendship in there, there's intellectual engagement, there's erotic physical attraction. It's a multifaceted and powerful force. As a minister, I've had the great gift of performing several weddings. Only a few have been weddings for people that I knew really well for years. That would include a good friend from college and my own cousin. This is my favorite type of wedding because you get to see what a relationship does to the individual. Getting to know someone before the relationship, all the way through the point of their wedding, you get to see how that relationship impacts someone. And a good romantic relationship can dramatically enhance the character of a person. It can bring balance. It can smooth some of the rough edges. A romantic relationship can bring a sense of responsibility and freedom, strangely at the same time. It can bring depth of joy that's rarely achieved in any other form. And of course, not all romance is helpful or constructive. I can't imagine how much pain and chaos has been the fruit of romance gone wrong. We know that misdirected passion can be dangerous. We do what we can to avoid it, and we try to gently guide youth away from it. Still, knowing the risk of love, knowing that it can be terribly destructive, for the most part, we continue to support it. Maybe even give it another try. At the very least, we support others seeking loving relationships. A good romantic love can enhance a person's character. I suspect that a good, deeply felt faith can do the same. Now, faith, like romantic love, when misdirected, can be a destructive thing. It's possible to be thoughtful and careful without shutting ourselves off, though. It's possible to open our hearts to possibility while keeping at least one foot on the ground. Loving another person is a risk. It risks rejection. It risks going down an uncertain path. But that joy only comes from offering a little vulnerability. And religion is no different. It's risky. We may be disillusioned. We may have our hearts broken as our understanding of the sacred changes. But what is life without a little bit of risk? So I want to leave you with one last poem of love. This comes from Hafiz. He writes, "How did the rose open?" I'm going to start that again. How did the rose ever open its heart and give to the world all of its beauty? It felt encouragement of light against its being. Otherwise, we all remain too frightened. Amen.